And all of that is centered again on the fact that I was looking for somebody who had a heart for God. And I knew that if this person had a heart for God, they're going to love God and serve the Lord. I know that they're going to love me correctly, because it's so easy to get lost in your passions and in your desires and your checklists,
Because I be worried about your soul. Why you still be doubting you got a soul? Like you need to see to believe these things, but you believe things that you've never seen. The feelings and hopes and dreams, the future emotions and gravity. And sadly, everything you're rejecting makes this whole life a tragedy.
Welcome to the Milk and Meat Podcast. I'm Aldo, and I'm joined with my lovely fiance, Vanessa.
Hi.
And we're here with Leslie and Andrew.
Hi.
This episode was one that we had talked about doing not too long ago. We want to kind of tackle the subject of Christian courtship, dating, what that looks like, because Vanessa and I, we serve in our local youth at our churches, and dating is always a hot topic. It's always like, when you're young, you get feelings and you want to date the person right next to you, and given the fact that Vanessa and I will be getting married this year, I just felt like it was a good time to bring up that subject and kind of walk through our experience with courtship, and the whole reason for dating in general is, I know we all agree, is to be married.
Yeah.
Is to get married, and that is lost in today's society. And with our youth in churches today, there's such a mixture with what the world wants versus what God wants, and our youth are exposed to that, and there's sort of this mix between God and the world, and I think our young generation is confused, especially if they have parents who aren't involved in their life, in their spiritual life. If they're parents that just say, well, go to youth and that's enough, which I think we did a whole episode on the importance of youth ministry and the parents' involvement. But yeah, I feel like kids are just exposed to the worst idea of courtship, the worst idea of dating. And the reason we're naming it courtship is because the word dating itself has gotten such a negative connotation to it, a negative view on it. And so we want to sort of expand on that.
Nice.
Yeah.
All right. So you guys have been courting for how many years?
So it's been
2.5.
Yeah, 2.5.
It's a long
2.5.
time.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's a long time.
Well,
it wasn't officially engaged for 2.5. That was only in the last 4 months.
Yeah, I proposed to her December last year. Yeah.
So 4 months of engagement so far.
Yeah.
Everything else was courtship. And it was intentionally courtship.
Yes.
That was the expectation.
And so before we get into everything, we'll just kind of walk through a little bit of our relationship and how it started, because it really was a courtship, and it wasn't immediately like, let's be boyfriend, girlfriend, because we did take our time to get to know each other, be friends. And what was really important for us was for us to meet our friends and our family, the people closest to us. So it was important for me to introduce her to you, to Leslie, Carlos, and the rest of the guys, because I know that you guys would see things that I wouldn't see. You know what I'm saying? If there were any red flags or something that I was just missing, because it's so easy to get lost in the feelings that you ignore things that might be problematic in the future. And I would say, for anybody who's looking to date somebody, bring them around your friends. Bring them around the friends that will tell you things you don't want to hear.
Because those are
the
kind of friends you need.
Yes, exactly. You don't want your friends, the friends that will just tell you the good things, or just to go along with whatever it is you're doing. No, I count on my brothers to tell me things. Like if I'm messing up, they're gonna tell me straightforward, like, hey, you need to do this. You need to watch out for that. So in that same way, introducing Vanessa to you guys, I knew you guys would tell me things, and gratefully that there was Vanessa's almost perfect. So
No.
no, but it was good though. So we sought out good Christian counsel. I would talk with you, Andrew, and Carlos, and you guys would give me your genuine opinion and advice on that. And Vanessa did the same thing on her end. And then when we finally, and then we prayed about it a lot. And when we finally came to that decision, and I smiled because she was always pushing, like, so what are we? What's the next step? And I like that because I needed those little pushes, those little nudges. But yeah, when we prayed about it and we finally said, yeah, let's go forward. Let's make this a romantic relationship. We'll be boyfriend and girlfriend. There was a lot of peace behind that. Mm-hmm. There was a lot of peace. We knew God was in control, and always we had God at the forefront of our relationship. Mm-hmm. We always wanted to honor Him. And I think another thing that's important when it comes to courtship, and I don't think it's talked about often, is you need to be content being single. Be content in your singleness and in your relationship with God. Because God brought me to a place where I was content with Him and His relationship. My heart and my goals were always to honor and to serve God. Same thing with Vanessa, and we lined up in that, but as individuals. And that really did make the actual coming together so much easier. As a matter of fact, we did a lot of Bible studies together prior to getting into a romantic relationship. And that's something that we will always highly recommend anybody who is looking to date somebody. Get together and read the Bible. Read the Bible, go through the Bible together, because you had said often, like, that's something you can't fake. Mm-hmm. You can't fake a genuine Christian, and the best way to see that is going through the Bible. Mm-hmm.
Unless both are fake Christians, and they won't know if they're faking each other out.
Yeah, there's always that.
I just gotta throw that in there. No, that's a possibility.
You're right. Yeah, you're right. But if you are somebody who is seeking after the Lord first and being content in your singleness, however difficult that may be for somebody, but you can reach a point where you're like, you know what, God, I'm trusting in you. Whenever it is your timing to put somebody in my life, I'm trusting you. And that's where Vanessa and I were before we met each other. Yeah. I don't know if you had anything to add there.
No, I think you covered pretty much most of it. I mean, for me, it was definitely, getting to the point where I was saying, even if I don't get married, like, is God enough? Like, and I had to come to that position where I was like, yes, I will still love God, and I won't be bitter, and I will still follow Him even if I don't get married. And that brought peace, but there was always that hope, that heart's desire that, like, God, I'm trusting you gave me this desire. I'm trusting you through the process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the idea of being content as single doesn't translate to, I don't care if I do or don't get married. There's an actual desire to have someone. Right. That's why Paul was able to talk about the concept of the gift, or God basically giving you that, granting you someone, that disposition of desire to prefer singleness. Mm-hmm. It's like, hey, if not everybody has that gift. Like, it's considered a gift for the sake of fully devoting yourselves without any ties to Christ's ministry, which is differently done versus someone that actually has any ties at all. Yeah. I mean, if somebody doesn't have to ever be home at any specific time for anyone else, they're actually living alone. They can live a very, very different life. Not better necessarily, but different, versus someone that actually has responsibilities. So they can live in a very different kind of way. So the idea of being content wasn't about not having a desire for it, because there were people that literally desired it and trying to practice the gift of singleness, they would actually burn in their hearts.
Yeah.
That's why Paul said it's better to marry than to burn. So there is this kind of place where people sometimes try to like force the singleness or force the holding back of marriage to some extent, that it becomes an internal burning, and that could lead to all sorts of things: lust, temptation, coveting, sin. So that's not what we're saying. We're not saying you didn't want to get married and you were like totally like, I don't want to get married, but you were like, I have God and he's enough for me, despite the fact that I still have this desire, which is a godly one, and I'm wanting that. So
and that's the emphasis I want to make is you got to get in a point in your relationship with the Lord where yes, you have that desire to get married, to find someone, but you're trusting solely on God. And while you're trusting God that he will provide somebody for you, you are actively serving. You're not in dismay, because I've met a lot of young people, a lot of young adults who they're just wanting so bad to be with somebody that they lose focus on their relationship with God, and they end up going into relationship after relationship, or they're pursuing somebody and that other person's just not reciprocating, and it's like, oh well, what's wrong with me? Been in those shoes before. And that's all because you have your focus on the wrong thing. Like, marriage is good, it's an awesome thing when it's the right time and when the Lord puts that in your life. And to desire someone to marry, it's a wonderful thing, especially nowadays, because I really feel like they've really knocked down the institute of marriage. Like, they've really made marriage seem like such a bad and horrible thing. And granted, there's been, I can't remember the statistic for divorce. It's like 50%, right? Like, that's what they always say. So desiring to marry somebody is good, but trust in the Lord and serve him while you wait. I think that's maybe hard to grip with, but it is important and necessary. Because like I said before, Vanessa and I, we were very at peace with the Lord before we had found each other.
And I think it's like also doing this like self-assessment, like, what is God trying to teach me, or how is he trying to grow me in this time of waiting? Like, I think about, like, had I met you a year earlier, or had, like, you know, it would have been different. Like, would I have been ready? And I think, like, God, I look through my journey and time of singleness, like, God was working on different things in my own heart, like learning how to communicate with just even friendships, relationships, and just really growing me to the point where I'm at now, so that I could be okay in a relationship, like not yet achieved, but like still a work in progress.
The concept of being content with God before you pursue another relationship, this only makes sense, I mean, ultimately to Christians or people that have been influenced by Christian culture.
Right.
Because someone else would be like, why do I need religion before I need a relationship? It's like, well, if you don't realize that you're not here to just self-appease, we're not created to just live a life for our own desires. We're actually created by the living God. We're not an accidental, chaotic event that has no purpose and meaning. We have a purpose. We have a creator. There's an order to things. So there's an aim for our lives. It's supposed to actually be in connection with that divine great one that has made us. So when people don't actually have a proper relationship with God, and then they pursue something else, in essence, they're pursuing things that will make them happy or that will satisfy them.
Yeah.
And you can't expect out of another person who is a fallen sinner to truly perfectly satisfy your selfish and even unfulfilled desires, because that person is a sinner.
Yeah.
So even on their best day, they're going to fail your expectations to some degree. And there's been so many relationships that I've seen. People get into the relationship and they put this weight and pressure, or they have this expectation of, you're going to make me happy. And when they don't, they get blamed, they get mistreated, they get cheated on, all because the institution is there of relationship and marriage, but the expectation is not real. It's not realistic. It's not what the Bible even expects. Like, the Bible doesn't show that another human being's fully going to satisfy you. It shows that you are broken away from a right relationship with God. So everything else is never going to truly satisfy that yearning heart and soul. Yeah. So when people don't have that proper relationship sorted out with their maker, they're bound to eventually discover that there are things that are not going to be fulfilled, even with the most wonderful relationship. So it's like it ends up putting an undue pressure on the other person.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, kind of on that point, like, we're going through marriage counseling with one of my pastors, and like he had told us something that it made me, I was like, oh yeah, that makes sense. He had said that, the goal of marriage, and so if we're dating with the intent to marry, like we should have that goal of marriage in our mind. But he said the goal of marriage is that sanctification, to be made more like Christ. And so like, that person is revealing like those things that you need to work on. And so like, we have to be willing to have our hearts change. And like, as we're going through, getting to know each other, and then engagement, and then marriage, like, I was listening to a podcast by Tim Keller, and he was saying that, like, my wife has married 5 people. Like, I'm not the same person that I was like 5 when we first started dating. Like, we have to be okay with that person helping to change us. Like, change is a good thing. Like, not just, okay, I want someone, they do their thing, I do my thing. Like, don't tell me like what to do and all of that stuff.
Yeah. And I really like that. During our premarital counseling, it really did open up my eyes. Something I didn't think of before or realize is there is that process of sanctification within the marriage. Just like she was saying, we will see the things in each other that need to be worked on, and in that process we do get better. And I understood even more so now why God compares Christ's return and taking the church as his bride. I get it more. It's like I see a more complete picture of our salvation in Christ, but also on why God compares it in marriage, because we ultimately, the goal in marriage, you do want to be better together, be a strong marriage. It's not the moment you see something wrong and something I really don't like, I'm gonna leave. It's like no. It's you work it out, just like we work out our salvation with fear and trembling. We work out our marriage, and marriages that I've seen that have lasted 50 years or long marriages, by the time they get to that point, they are a solid marriage. Like they're wonderful. They're a marriage to look up to. So yeah, I really did appreciate that when we got to that point of our premarital counseling. I mean, what experiences could you tell us in regards to that? You guys have been married, what, 7, 8?
9 years.
9 years, yeah.
In 2 weeks.
In
1 week. Sorry, in 5 days.
In 5 days, nice.
There it is. In
Happy
5 days.
Anniversary.
Almost.
Yay.
Confetti. What's been our experience with preparation for marriage or marriage in itself?
Well, when you guys were married, right? Like, what was that initially like when you guys first got married, right? I
was personally very humbled because I realized that I am a selfish, stingy jerk, and I did not know that until I was in a place where there was always someone else to care for.
Yeah.
And you don't like leave the house and now you're all alone again. Like, you're living together. So I realized how preoccupied I am with my preferences, with my ideas. No matter how much I wanted to give myself in every way to Leslie, it's like I was surprised that I don't want to give some time or some devotion or I was like, what the heck is wrong with me? And I didn't come to those conclusions until we were living together. And I was like, wow, here I was thinking I'm all that in a bag of potato chips and I'm not. So for me, it was like an incredibly surprising realization. Like, wow, it is much easier to be patient when you can like get the relief from need to be patient. Like, it's easier to be patient with my kids for a few hours, and then I have an errand to run. And I'm like, I don't have to like hear the nagging or complaining. It's like, it's easy to be patient for a short period of time because it's not like an endless thing. It reminds me of the fact that some people say, could Christ have sinned? And some people say like, oh, he could have if he chose to. It's like, no, he could not have. He could never have sinned. And that's actually a great concept, because if you realize that Christ never could have sinned, it means he endured sin and temptation to the degree that no human being has or could ever endure it, because we break under it and the pressure relieves when you break under it. When you fall into sin, you actually get a sense of relief from holding against it, from the resistance. Not like a good relief, but there's a relief.
Right.
Because you're no longer resisting. Christ never had that relief. He never had the relief of having to keep holding against that sin to some degree. He always resisted it. So he endured it in a much greater way, to a greater extent than any other human would ever know anything about the resistance to temptation and sin, because he never gave in and he never had that relief. So in marriage, you don't get the relief of resisting against your own pride and arrogance and selfishness. You're forever together. So you will day, night, wake up, and you're still needing to engage in that patience, that sacrifice. So it's like, it's a heavier load to live with someone than it is to date someone and then to go to your own personal house at the end of the day, because then you get relief. You don't have to do for them. So people don't think of it that way, but I experience it that way. And people nowadays may never know that feeling before marriage, because so many people cohabit before they get married.
Yeah.
And they've already gotten used to it. And it's like, they don't even know, they don't understand the level of marriage, what it's supposed to signify, because they do all of the marriage stuff before they get married. So for them, marriage is kind of like, let's sign the papers and do the taxes. It's no longer like, let's really bring our lives together, because they've already done it. Maybe the checking account is the last thing. Sign the papers and add the checking account. That's probably the last thing people usually do now, because they invest everything. I know people that bought a house together. They weren't even married. You guys really invested in a $250,000 piece of property? You're not even married. You don't even know if this is going to work, because you don't know if you want to commit to that person. Golly. That's heavy, man. Like Back to the Future. That's heavy, man.
Leslie, how about
so yeah, that was
you?
my experience.
The first year was hard. I think for every new couple, the first year is going to be very tough, because you're in the honeymoon season, in lovey-dovey, you know, and I feel like no matter the husband or wife, there's like this fear of, I don't want to screw up. I don't want to disappoint that person or frustrate that person, or I don't want them to see my flaws. I want to keep that love like as long as you can. But it's really a big adjustment. You get to see the little things that bother him or things that bother you. Yeah, but that year was very challenging. I'm not gonna lie, I was ready to quit on that first year. I was.
I just found out.
I've told you before.
Wow.
No, and see, and I love that, and I think that's important for anybody who is courting or looking to date for the purposes of marriage. Like, keep that in mind, because it's marriage. Like, I think Disney has ruined us with all the lovey-dovey stuff.
Happily ever after.
Yeah, happily ever after. It's like, I tell Vanessa all the time, like, I want to see your ugly side. I want to know if I could deal with that, you know?
Just don't tell her when you see it.
Yeah.
Be like, even your ugly side is beautiful to me.
That's ugly.
We have some mutual friends, or a couple that I often tell them, like, I love their picture of marriage, and the wife is always like, really? We're always arguing and blah, blah. I'm like, no, but I like that, because you're working it out, you know, through these little arguments. And I'm not talking about like these catastrophic arguments where, you know, it's like 1 foot out the door.
Yeah.
No, I'm talking about like it's like the kids, oh, well, you didn't do this and I didn't do that. And they might be hashing it out, but they're working it through. And it shows a picture of what marriage like is. It's like you're working through all the hard stuff, because it's easy to love someone when everything is good.
Oh yeah.
But can you love them when everything is hard? You know? So I really love that you guys brought that up, because it's important to have that in mind as you're dating someone, because while you're dating, you're not living with rather, if you're a Christian, and that's what we're talking about.
If you're godly,
yeah,
I'll say it. If you are living a biblically moral life, in respect to marriage and relationships.
Yes.
You will not be cohabiting pre-marriage.
Yes.
At all.
Exactly. And that's what I mean. So if you're dating and you're a Christian, keep in mind those things, like what marriage is. Like, marriage can get ugly, and I'm saying this as an unmarried man, just engaged, and it's easy to say it now, but we'll see in a year from now.
We'll make another episode.
Yeah. but
Follow up with Aldo.
But I do look forward to those things that will make our marriage stronger, and that we could get what's the right word, reproved, or
okay, you can grow in sanctification.
Yeah, grow in sanctification. And that kind of leads me to my next point. It's like, when we finally were looking to date somebody, one of the things that we did is, because we were in a close relationship with God, we now knew what to look for in the other person, right? Because I can tell you that for me, before really being content in the Lord, I had horrible ideas for what I wanted in a woman. Mm-hmm. Or maybe not horrible, but just unrealistic expectations and
fleshly. Yeah,
very fleshly desires that God needed to work out in my heart. So when we finally when I was finally looking for somebody, I wanted somebody who was on the same level of faith as me, or in belief. Like, I wanted her to believe in the God of the Bible, and I mean that, like, because it's, anybody could say they're Christian, and I've met other women who were quote unquote Christian and their lives did not reflect that. I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to deal with that. And there's a verse in the Bible, 2 Corinthians, and let me pull it up real quick. 2 Corinthians 14.
6:14 to 15.
Yeah, 6:14. It says, and this is the NASB. Other versions say unequally yoked, but the NASB says, "Do not be mismatched with unbelievers, for what righteousness and lawlessness share together? Or what does light have in common with the darkness? Or what harmony does Christ have with Belial? Or what does a believer share with an unbeliever?" Like,
that's the 2020 version of NASB, right?
I believe so. Yeah.
95 reads differently. That's why I'm like,
oh, does it?
Yeah, there's two versions, but it's fine.
All right.
It's the Bible. It comes from the Greek.
Yes.
We're good.
Yeah. But yeah, like, you don't want to come together with somebody who is not a believer, because you guys are going to clash heads. I know, I've heard it before. It's like, oh, well, I'll preach to them. I could change them. God can change anybody at any point. But you are setting yourself up for a big struggle if you decide to marry an unbeliever or be in a romantic relationship with an unbeliever. Yeah. Especially because an unbeliever doesn't have the Holy Spirit that will enable them to restrict temptation. Mm-hmm. I mean, how many people do we know that have fallen to sexual immorality because they've dated somebody who was not a Christian? You know what I'm saying? And it devastates their life, because the Christian knows that they've sinned. The Christian knows that they are sinning. And so that's just destroying your relationship with Christ. And that's the most valuable thing a Christian has. The non-believer doesn't feel that at all. The non-believer is like, well, we like each other, you know, why not? Let's live together.
The idea is, don't be, 2 Corinthians 6 says, don't be bound together. Other versions, don't be yoked together. Yoke is like something, piece of wood go across the shoulders of two different animals that are supposed to perform the work of grazing or farm work. They're not going to be separated. They're going in a direction. And if they go in completely opposite directions, they're just going to be standing still. So ultimately, it's like, you cannot progress and move forward in one direction as a family unit should be if you are yoked oppositely or going in opposite directions intentionally. So if you got, like, for example, one person that says, I want to I want to be married and I want to live in Connecticut. Another person says, I want to be married, I want to go in Alaska. One of you is going to lose your will. Mm-hmm. One of you will. And there is such thing as, conceding to the other partner, but ultimately it's like you're losing will. Now, in a much greater way, this isn't about Connecticut and Alaska, but I want to follow the Lord Jesus Christ because he's the king. And I know that sin is evil, and I want to walk in a faithful, repentant lifestyle. Yeah. The other one says, I want to fulfill my desires, and I want to be a decent, moral, secularly, socially moral person. Mm-hmm. Either you're going to end up you're going to end up either sinning against God, trying to fulfill your wife's wishes, which are sinful, not just like preferences that are acceptable, just intentionally sinful. Or she is going to compromise her atheism or agnosticism and pretend to care about your faith and fulfill it. And give an image of not just, I'm honoring my husband. It's like you're acting a part and you don't actually agree with it. So you may even grow some sort of a hardened hypocrisy or maybe an opposition to the Christian faith because you've been forced or ended up in these situations because your husband was Christian and you didn't really care. So now all these expectations and standards of Christianity seem less of a loving thing, more of a burden and a force. Now you might actually grow a distaste for the gospel. So, it could damage both people. It would damage a Christian. It might damage a non-Christian. And people don't imagine that. They're like, no, it will help her. It's like, no, when you're told to hold to standards that you don't have in your heart, to be good to the one you love, it's not an exciting thing. It seems forced. It seems unwelcomed. So at some point, one of the two people, to some extent, will feel like they are not being permitted to go in the direction they really want to go, unless they conform and completely go in the other direction. So we're not supposed to, as people that should be people of the book, following Christ, knowing this world, we shouldn't be linking up with people that are intentionally and committedly going in the opposite direction, saying, hey, I like you. It's like, that person hates your God. Yeah. They don't want to. Why would you say, let's live life together? So you can't. You can't live life together. You can't have fellowship with somebody that goes in a completely different direction.
Yeah. And contextually, this verse isn't talking about like dating.
Yeah, it's talking about marriage. Yeah. Or ministry. You could really relate this in many ways.
Yeah, but I feel it really strongly applies to this when you're looking for somebody. It's like, be very wary of that. Yeah, you were going to say something?
No, I was going to say, I like you said, I think those values, and I think in the whole dating aspect, like there's no verse about dating or courtship, but like it's looking at it, the biblical principles for marriage, and if we're dating with the intent to marry, like applying those principles to our lives and the person we're searching for, and like in the aspects of being unequally yoked, I think it's also that caution in people, like even if they may say, oh yeah, I believe in Jesus, or I identify as a Christian, but like in that dating process, you're seeing where their heart is truly at. And I think that's where you can see in doing Bible studies together, like we did. Like you can see, like, is this person at the same level? Are they pursuing God at the same level as I am? Like I heard someone say, like, in dating, you're running a race and then you look to the side and you see that person who's running at the same pace. Like you don't want someone way too far behind or way too far ahead, because like I've seen it. And like in people in my life where, there's that, even though the person may have said that they're a Christian, but, there's this disconnect in the whole family relationship. And then you have one person who is trying to raise their family to be a godly family, to love the Lord, and it might be not the right roles. Like maybe it's a wife. And so she is having to lead her family to do that when it's actually the husband's role, or they should be doing it together. And so like that's something that always stuck with me. Like I am someone like, I'm serving God. I'm, pursuing the Lord in my word, and like wanting to have someone who is doing the same as well. And it, like you said, if you don't, it can cause this disconnect where, well, maybe this person is out and serving the Lord and volunteering ministries. And obviously there's that balance, right? If you're spending all of your time at ministry and not at home with a family, then, that's not the greatest either. But I've seen where that causes this disconnect. And it's like, well, you're never home. Like when in reality, they should have been maybe serving together, or maybe if we're not doing the same thing, but like I know like, okay, that's where God has called you. And, you know, like I'm supportive of it. I'm supportive of you following God's calling versus getting that selfish desires and be like, well, you're never home with me. Like you don't do all of this or that.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's, you know, one thing to keep in mind in dating.
Yeah, absolutely. Always be wary about that. And as far as the practicality goes in our Bible studies, whenever we do get together for a Bible study, especially early on, I noticed that it wasn't just me reading through and making points, because naturally that's where God is leading me to teach and to preach. But it wasn't her just like, okay, sitting there, yes, just to get through the Bible study. No, she would engage, and she would offer up her, you know, some points in regards to the passages we're reading, and we're talking it out, hashing it out. And if there was maybe a minor disagreement, we'd go back and forth. Look for that in the Bible study. Don't just sit there and read through the Bible and your partner is not engaging at all. No, have the actual discussion. Like Vanessa was saying, that's how you would be able to see, you know, who's real and who's fake.
Yeah.
So I will always encourage that. And if you're looking for somebody and you don't know where their stance is with the Lord, go through the Bible. And if they're not willing to go through the Bible with you in the first place, then that should be an automatic, like,
It's a flag.
yeah, we should stay friends, you know, because
Distant friends.
yeah, or yeah, bring them to Bible study together, come together as a group or something, you know, help the person out. Don't just leave them hanging, but probably not the best option for
Just
courtship.
knock on the door. Gospel tracts.
Yeah, there you
Hey,
go.
based on our Bible study last week, you need this.
But yeah, like really be intentional about the things that you're doing while you're dating, because for us, it was everything we did was intentional. From bringing her to my friends, her bringing me to her friends, the Bible study together, going to church together. Be very intentional. And again, this is as a Christian. And if you're a non-believer, first and foremost, we encourage you to seek the Lord, repent, believe the gospel. But as Christians, you know, be intentional about your dating. And I think it would also maybe help weed out some of the people that wouldn't be right for your life. Because if you're intentional about serving the Lord, people who don't want that they'll walk away. As much as you might want them, they won't want you, and you will be able to see that, hopefully.
Yeah.
I don't know if you had anything to add, Leslie.
Why do you have to call on me?
You haven't said anything.
Well, first of all, what is courtship?
Oh, it's a good question.
What is courtship?
Google knows.
Let's get some real definition.
Well, I'd say simply it's dating for the purpose of marriage,
Marriage,
or a
yeah.
preparation for marriage.
Yeah.
But let's see. To be involved with romantically, typically with the intention of marrying.
Typically, huh?
Simple enough. Courtship is a period wherein some couples get to know each other prior to a possible marriage or committed romantic de facto relationship.
I think on that point, it says when they get to know each other, and that's important to get to know that person in the dating process. And I think for us, it was unique in being long distance. We had to get to know each other more on less on the physical just lovey-dovey stuff. Not that we didn't have it, but more on I got to know him and who he is as a person, and like, you know, what makes him tick, you know, what he believes in, because we had to be intentional in spending that quality time, like on the phone and honing in those skills.
Yeah, you're right on that. The fact that we had this long distance relationship actually helped a lot, because we had to really communicate with one another about what we like, what we don't like. One thing I always found wonderful is that when we finally did, like I would go over there and we'd come together, we'd go on a date or whatever, the conversation continued. Like it wasn't like this awkward, like, yeah,
nice to see you in person.
No, it was so natural, and it carried on. And I guess the next point is, now that we are dating, that when we finally came together to actually be a romantic couple, and then we continued to do those things as far as Bible studies go, going to church together, whenever we could, obviously. And now it was like, I think the normal thing nowadays is you date for a very long time and then you propose. And that's something that I really appreciate about Vanessa, is Vanessa was not looking to do that at all. Like,
but not like a long time.
No, I know, but it's because it's funny. I think I told you this before. It's throughout our relationship that I wanted to have a conversation with you before we could talk about getting engaged and all that. And I was actually planning on having that conversation with her like around this time this year. But
look at you taking your time.
I was gonna, but you know,
I prayed.
See, prayer works.
The Lord listened to her.
Just letting you know, his favorite life verse is Joshua 1:9. Be strong and courageous.
I fail at that verse all the
Hey,
time.
Because he always needs to stop being timid and go get what he needs to get. So as you can see, your prayers have accomplished.
All right, I'm gonna change the subject. So does that mean you already knew before him that you were, like, you saw him as a future spouse?
That's a
I
good
did.
question.
Because it's the whole point of courtship.
Yeah. Well, I think it was like, it was interesting, and I think throughout the whole process, like there was like peace in our first meetup, peace in the dating, and like I feel like I had the peace maybe a little bit before you did on sometimes, but you know it, and even in the dating, I learned like it's you kind of do it in the acts of like how, like almost as if I don't know the words to say, but like even I would, like when I was like, hey, what are we, like I could have had an option where I just went up to him like, you need to decide right now, we're either dating official or we're not, I'm gonna leave. Like I was thinking that in my mind. I'm like, I'm not okay with this answer, like he's got to know. But then I had to like sit and reflect.
It sounds like you had a time frame. So like I feel like, well, because we didn't have
a woman knows what she wants.
I know, but see, today people have standards, and someone will be like, okay, if I'm gonna date this person, within the year we need to move in already and play house to
that's
see if
that's not called standards. That's called lack of standards.
Okay, but see, a lot of people get so excited because they see this person, they have everything on their checklist, and they'll turn down their boundaries and do everything to please them. And they're like, okay, we moving in within this year, or no, I'm gonna wait a year before we get even more serious, or like stuff like that. So in the Christian, in the Christian world, it's like, is there a time frame? Is there like a year?
So
Adam met Eve the day after she was born. She wasn't an infant, and married her that very second, because God says, Adam said, this is the woman you have brought to me. This is the rib of my rib.
But that's not fair. They had no choice. It was just right there. They were the only people.
The purpose was to come together. The purpose was, here she is.
So I actually have sort of an answer for that. I don't know how satisfying it might be for some people, but for a long time, my mindset was like, you gotta like wait 2 years, 3 years to then maybe propose, right? And then everybody around me who is a solid Christian, they got engaged and got married like 3 months later.
Yep, that's us.
Yeah.
I know what I want.
But that's the benefit of making Christ the center of your relationship, because there's so much peace to that. And it's not like just a feeling, right? Because I mean, I've really hung on to the heart is deceitful about all things, right? But there is a very real peace there, and God will show it by putting things fall in line. Like, again, it was very important for me to have that conversation with her, right? And in my mind, I was going to have it around sometime this year, around this time. Yet God, in a very natural way, made it so that that conversation happened months ago. And I knew, I was like, I have to marry this girl. And then with that being said, when we did get engaged, I'm like, I don't want a long engagement. If I could, I would marry her like right now, you know, and do the ceremony. But no, she wants to have like 400 people in the wedding. But
No.
that's not
300.
That's
We
neither here
counted.
nor there.
It's only 300. Right?
But no, yeah, when you have Christ at the center of your relationship, I really don't believe the engagement would last should last that long.
So basically, there is no like time frame. It really depends on how God is leading you and your, your other person.
Yeah.
I think the key is God leading you, and it's the denial of the flesh. Like if it's this passion, like I just want to get married, I just want to, which is a real thing. I want to have sex. Like we got to get married so we can have sex first, versus like to really get to know that person. And even through even for me, it was just very prayerful. Like even when he was like, there's something I want to tell you, and before we can move to the next step. And like in my mind, and this was like when we were here, like I'm like, he needs to have the conversation. I'm gonna sit him down and he's gonna talk. Like I'm gonna be like, spit it out. Like but then I had to like step back and I reassessed, and then I was like prayed, and I'm like, you know what, God, like I'm asking you, like you to lead him to have that conversation, not like me take the role, like and trying to like to practice like almost those aspects of being a biblical wife, like letting God lead him.
Yeah.
And then so through that, then like, God just opened the doors and it was that peace. But like even back when I was younger, like not so long ago, I was like this time, like, okay, we're going to be dating for this long and then engaged for this long. And then it's like, you realize like, no, like when you have the peace of God and it's like God's true peace, like you don't have to worry. Like I think about like our story and like just the craziness of it. And it's like totally not like me, but there's like just God's peace through it all.
That's such a worldly thing. They tell you, they teach you, encourage you, take your time, do these steps, and it's
have
funny.
A checklist.
Yeah, and then it's like we tell God like we want this, and God's like, haha, okay,
Yeah.
just switches everything around for you.
Yeah.
So,
and I
yeah,
think
it's
on
funny.
that note, it's like even in going back to like the whole dating process, having realistic expectations.
Yes.
We make our list. And even us as girls, like, we want a guy who lives like this and this. He's got to have this job. And it's like, okay, some of those things are real. Like, obviously, you don't want a guy who's just, like, sitting and being a couch potato.
A bum.
A bum, yeah. And, like, but, realistic expectations. Like, does he have goals? Like, what is he striving? Are we going towards the same thing? And for me, it was even, like, modifying. And even, I think, on the Christian dating website, like you're thinking about these things, like you have this view of how the person you're going to marry should look, and maybe they might not fit that view, but it's like, are you closing people off because they're not X, Y, and Z, which is like, what are your negotiables and non-negotiables? And for each person, that's different. Like,
Yeah. And all of that is centered again on the fact that I was looking for somebody who had a heart for God. And I knew that if this person had a heart for God, they're going to love God and serve the Lord. I know that they're going to love me correctly, because it's so easy to get lost in your passions and in your desires and your checklists, and ultimately all that falls apart. It does, like your own, and it's not bad to have, some kind of expectation or standard, but leave room for God to adjust. And that's what happened. Like the non-negotiable was somebody who wanted God. Like God, that's number one. Everything else, you can rearrange it however you want.
so if I was a hobo, it'd be okay.
If you wanted Christ,
you
you'd
wanted
be a really
Christ.
good Christian hobo.
Yeah.
I've met some.
the
Well,
Lord.
by hobo you just mean like homeless person, right? I've met some.
Well, if I was just
I don't know why. I don't know why they choose that. I don't know why they're in that. But I've met some actual Christians who like are content being homeless.
Yeah.
It's odd.
It is odd.
It is odd. But and then I met those that say they're Christian. I'm like,
Yeah.
my friend, your language, what you're doing how you're acting. No way, Jose. But others, I'm like, my goodness.
Yeah.
Like, I'm able to have a Bible study with some of these guys on the side of the highway. Sitting there, I'm like, this guy's a brother. What are you doing? It's like, I just don't want to be tied down. I'm like, no, you don't. So,
But yeah,
as far as time limit, I'd say, I think everyone kind of recognizes their own body when they're starting to burn with passion. 1 Corinthians 7:8-9. This is Paul speaking about marriage, divorce, widows, remarriage, all that. And these two kind of removed verses say, but I say to the unmarried and to widows, that it is good for them if they remain even as I, meaning he was single. But if they do not have self-control, let them marry. For it is better to marry than to burn. And the words with passion, but it's just, the actual Greek says just to burn. The idea is that if you do not have the gift of singleness, and you are now going through that roller coaster of emotions and feelings within your heart, and you have chosen the one, or you see who you might want to be with, marry. Now, it doesn't say date and see. It's like, it just says marry. The idea of courtship is, it's like a betrothal. You get, in many cultures, you get engaged. Then while you're preparing for the wedding, you get to know that wife to be. And it's not supposed to be like a decade long getting to know.
Right.
You're literally not going to
quick.
touch her until you get married. So you're not like, 17 months later. It's like, you don't get to have all that fun. She ain't yours yet. So in the way Christ spoke about it, he spoke about it as coming, giving the deposit. He gave the deposit of the Holy Spirit. It's a down payment. It's a down payment from God. Ephesians 1 speaks about you've been given the down payment or the seal of the Holy Spirit. And he gave that allusion to marriage in his relationship to us.
Yes.
He's given us this, and he says, I'm going to go prepare a place. I'm not going to leave you as orphans. I will come back to take you to be with me. In my Father's house is much room. It's not mansions, it's room. So the idea is, just like in many cultures, even in that culture, somebody would want the woman, go to the father, give a down payment, a dowry, something to show dad that, hey, I'm not a bum. I got support. Your daughter's not going to go and be homeless, or she's got sustenance with me. So please reserve her for me. Don't let another man come and claim her. And he was like, yes. And then he would go and prepare a house, an area, reserve it, rent it, build it, whatever it is. And then when that thing is ready, he's going to go and pick up his wife, and now they're able to have the ceremony. So that period of time of betrothal, that's like, I betroth you, I'm engaged to you, and now I get to know you for a period of time. I wouldn't say it's like it's a mandatory long period. It's just, we have it sometimes backwards, like we spend all this time dating, then we get engaged, and then we do more dating. It's like, we kind of overextend that sometimes. And but I think in this culture, at least in my experience of United States American culture, it's very different from other cultures. And I think because of that, we're having this conversation, and we're explaining that these are the experiences we've had. Like, if we were in a different culture, you wouldn't be a working woman. You would not have to decide on your career in any way, shape, or form. So this would be a very quick decision. Once you would know that he's for you, you're for him, you'd be like, I have nothing else to consider. I don't have to choose about where I'm going to work. It's like, I'm living at my parents' house. I'm waiting to be with my future husband. So it would be significantly faster. But now, because of the culture that we're in, at least, people have their own lives. They have their own careers. They've invested years into education. Now a marriage is like, what am I going to do with all of these years of work and hard work? Am I going to abandon it? You really got to sacrifice to get married. And that's why sometimes people have to think through a lot of different things that other cultures will never have to think about. Yeah. So it's a whole different scenario here than it is in some other cultures.
Yeah, and there's a lot of beauty to that because, and I'm sure to somebody what you just described sounds awful for the woman. Like, oh, is she just a piece of property? Is she just an object? It's like I get that where somebody might get that thinking, but no, it's actually a beautiful thing because the woman is protected the entire time. Like the father's not going to just give her up to any other man. She is protecting her daughter, you know, her well-being, her life, you know, and she's being provided for under her father's home. And so the next man that comes around, the father's going to be like, yes, this is a good man. And he, you know, no good father is going to give their daughter off to some bum, like you were saying. You know, there's a protection there in the same way where God protects our salvation. He's the one that keeps it. You know,
the woman goes from under roof to under roof.
Yes,
there's no like time of out there in the danger all on her own trying to fend for herself.
And that's what we see in this culture here in the United States. Is there's a strong encouragement, and you know, and I'm not knocking that a woman shouldn't have a career, but there is this like kind of fend for yourself, you know, and it's different and it's difficult, you know. I tend to like the more, you know, protect the woman, you know,
traditional way.
Yeah, the traditional way. And it's not that you're going to be my object or anything. It's just now I want to protect you. I want to make sure that you're okay at all times to the best of my strengths and abilities. And, you know,
and he has a gun. So there's that.
Well, I think part of
throw
it.
that out there.
I'm working on 2 more, you know.
I think part of it also comes from, like, you know, when people, there's not that thought of the two become one anymore. It's like, okay, I'm living my life, you're living our life. I guess we'll come together and live our life.
Compromise where you need to.
And really, you know, if you're going to try to change what I'm doing, like, no, like, I'm about to bounce. But it's not that. It's the two merging into one. And so, like, even for me, as I'm pursuing my degree to be a APRN and going through all that stuff, it doesn't mean, like, well, guess I'm going to be at home. Like, I can't follow my dreams anymore. I guess it's done. Like, I'm still going to work. I'm still going to be a CNS and all that stuff. And he's still going to follow his dream. But as our dreams are merging into one, and it's that.
We're not two separate lives.
And it's that compromise in that. Like, how are we going to make our lives come together as one? And so maybe it might not, like, you know, the battle between, well, long distance, who's going to move where are we going to live? And it's not just like, well, I want this, so therefore you need to do that. It's us coming together and making the decision prayerfully. And I think whether you're long distance or like in the same city, it's like, that's the image it should be. It's the two coming together, merging their lives to become one in all aspects. And like you mentioned, checking accounts earlier, like, but you know, some people, like, even like there's not that merging of the check-in. There's not that, and that's where, you know, that was one question we asked our pastor in marriage counseling. Like, it's like, okay, well, I have mine, you have yours, but there's, in that sense, it's that selfish that, well, I need that safety net just in case I have to bounce. There's always that.
A weird safety net.
It's always like, but that's, I mean, that's because they're not having that biblical view of marriage. And when, if you have that true biblical view, like,
there's no out clause.
Yeah, there's no going back. And like, and because marriage represents Christ's relationship with us, like, what if he had that view? Like, what if he had, like,
if you suck, I'm leaving you.
Yeah, like,
that's you can lose it if you're bad at being a Christian. It's like everyone's bad at being a Christian. So,
like, you can't lose your salvation. So like,
praise God for that.
Right.
Yeah. And when I mentioned protection, you know, the father protecting the daughter and then going into now being the wife of a husband and being under protection, it's like it wasn't not just physical protection, but emotionally and spiritually, because the father, you know, would be leading his family, you know, closer to God. The same thing, the husband will be leading the wife closer to God. And, you know, there's a quick biblical verse that came to mind about guarding your heart, because the whole of, you know, in this day and age, this generation of dating, nobody's protecting their heart and guarding their heart. Nobody's being protected just because of the lack of fathers in the home nowadays. It's like, and again, I say this to steer away from the idea that the woman is an object. But anyway, Proverbs 4:23 says, "Keep your heart with all vigilance, for from it flows the springs of life." Like, nobody's guarding their heart when they're dating and they're going from one to the other to the other to the other. That's why you have so many messed up ideas when it comes to marriage, or ideas when it comes to the opposite sex. Like I've heard both men and women say horrible things about the opposite sex, like, oh, they ain't nothing, and they're no good for anything, or they're only good for one thing. And and this stems from that hedge of protection that God gives us when we're dating as Christians, as God intended, even though there's no written way to do it. But the principle of it is always have God be the center of it all, and serve him. You are under his protection until you find someone.
Yeah. And on the topic of guarding your heart, I believe it is 100% impossible to do that once you become sexually active, because that in itself is not a heart guarding activity. It is actually a heart rendering activity.
Yes.
So Bible condemns any sexual activity before marriage. That is undisputable. Anybody that wants to argue that, milkandmeatpodcast at gmail.com. Please email us.
Or
we'll make an episode. Comment. Or find me. I'm in Yuma. Talk to me. I'll make an episode. I'll put you on it.
Let's talk.
Let's talk. But sexual activity, people get into it because they feel like that is the best that they can give another person.
It feels more like an agenda. If you think about it. Well, when I was in junior high, I was already hearing girls so young having sex.
What age is that? I don't know.
13?
I'm bad at the whole
13?
elementary. I don't know.
11 to 13.
11, 13. Perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect.
So, and then by high school, freshman year, pretty much every girl in
high
class
school
was already sexually active.
Yeah, so that's, I don't know from how
That's 14.
women think, but as far as how men think, you're a complete schmuck and a loser if you haven't slept with somebody.
Yeah.
So being a virgin is something to like never
Frown
admit.
upon. Yeah.
Very much.
Yeah, I actually had a conversation with somebody about that recently. This person, they're in a new relationship, and this person was getting worldly advice. And they're like, oh, well, you have to give it up at some point to make the relationship work.
Oh, and that one I hate so much. You got to sleep with that person to know if you're going to like it.
Yeah.
It's like, what?
Idiots.
Yeah.
That is such bad advice.
Yeah, but to Leslie's point, like that is a real conversation that happens.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, people used to compare women, well, at least in my circles, military, whatnot, compared to like, you got to test the car before you buy it. You just compare somebody that you're going to be married to a piece of metal and plastic. It's really like disrespectful, objectifying perspectives of the other gender.
Yeah.
And that's a common thread. That's why the music industry is what it is. It's so popular. Women exploit themselves, men exploit themselves. No one really knows how to respect themselves, but they expect other people to respect them. And I think it's an unrealistic expectation.
Yeah, and with those kinds of thoughts, it just shows that their hearts they've never guarded their hearts. Their hearts at this point are crumbled in pieces.
I think on the aspect of guarding your hearts is like really assessing and like and the people, like not just date to date, like going back to date with the intent of marriage. And so I see, and like even in talking with some of my youth, like when I told them like, yeah, Aldo was my first boyfriend, they were like, what? That's crazy. But and I remember as a kid, I remember thinking, God, like, am I ugly? Like, why has any guy asked me out? Or, I'd have like different, possibly almost relationships, but nothing would happen, nothing would move. And I would just always be in turmoil and wonder. But I think I learned God was guarding my heart ahead of time. And then also, but there was that responsibility of myself to guard my heart too. And then not just, see anyone and be like, yeah, I'm going to date you, because with that comes a heartbreak. And I think that's part of the process too, and guarding your heart to really be cautious in like who you're going to date. And even, I mean, that's a word I give my youth all the time, like really like going back to what your intent of dating, like even dating as a teen, it's one of those subjects is like, are you dating to marry? But like, it's in doing that, like you might not be guarding your heart.
Yeah.
Did you have a further point? Because I know we kind of cut you off.
You did? Oh,
yeah.
I didn't even notice.
Because you were.
No, I'm good.
Okay.
No one's good.
Yeah.
Not even one. I'll cut that out.
Well, let's talk about how each of us went into courtship, because it really does look different.
Yeah.
Now that
Between
you guys,
us, yeah.
you guys did online dating, and we just randomly got together.
Yeah. Yours,
Yeah,
I
mine's
love
weird.
your guys's because you guys weren't even
You got this,
a couple.
babe. Go ahead.
No.
Oh, okay.
I want to hear your perspective.
Yes,
First?
there it is.
Yes.
Oh man.
On the spot.
Let's see. So I can't remember
July 2014.
Oh, sure.
when you first asked me out.
Yes.
No, that wasn't the first time you asked me out. That's when you officially stated that he wanted to pursue something more than just dating.
Okay.
I can't remember when we were officially introduced.
Oh, yeah.
That's like, I just knew this white guy in our church because we were in a Mexican church, and he was always hanging out with my brother and my cousins. And one weekend, my roommate and I came to visit. My car broke down and I couldn't find a ride back home to Tucson, Arizona. I called our friend Carlos.
Big ups, Carlos.
And he couldn't, but he told me, hey, do you know Andrew? I'm like, I've heard of him, don't really know him. And he's like, he has all the time. He has a lot of free time. And if you call him and ask him, he will definitely say yes. He'll
Appreciate
drive
you,
you.
Carlos, blowing up my spot.
Which, when you think about this, kind of like, first off, that has to be all God, because that's kind of weird. Like some random guy coming picking you up. Like,
Well, I didn't call him. I called another friend, and he suggested to
A
call.
trusted friend.
So,
Oh, no, it was all
God's-
God.
Yeah, it
You
was
should-
all
you
God's
should-
providence.
I don't know
No,
if
the
I would
stuff that
trust
happened-
a random guy to pick me up from Tucson.
yeah, I remember telling Carlos, I'm not sure, that's kind of weird because I don't know this guy.
Yeah.
He's like, no,
You
he'll
pick up homeless people. What are you talking about?
one. And
Doug's great. I love
Aldo
Doug.
and the guys yelled at me for
Doug
it.
is
Okay?
great. Doug was at our wedding.
Doug was
So-
awesome.
Doug is great. Big ups, Doug, if you're seeing this.
And so I don't remember if I called you or texted you. Most likely I called you because you were sleeping, because it was late at night.
It was 11 o'clock at night.
Yeah.
I was up.
And
Wow.
he said yes, and he came, picked me and my roommate, and I had to drive. I think you took a nap in the back.
Even early on in our relationship,
I drove his
I
car.
make her drive.
And we were caught in a rainstorm. We had to stop. He woke up and started talking to me and my roommate. We got to know him a lot more. He was
Started reading 1 Corinthians 11.
he was giving us a Bible study on our way back, and that was it. After that night, we just sort of stayed connected. It wasn't the first time he gave me a ride back home.
By being connected, she means her car broke down about 4 more times within the period of
He's
1
the
year.
only one I could call. So, yeah, that's just how it happened, how we met officially. Didn't think much of it. I know that the three of us, Aldo and Andrew and I, got close. We ministered together. And
Morning prayers.
Yeah.
Good times.
one Sunday, I went to church late, and I was excited to see everyone because I wasn't living in Yuma anymore. And he came up to me in front of other youth, young men, and he says, hey, do you want to go to In-N-Out? I'm like, yeah, sure, let's go. We all go, thinking that he was inviting me in a group gathering. And he ended up picking me up, which I didn't notice. That was odd because, you're not supposed to be in the same car alone.
Yeah.
So once we got there and I realized there was no other youth members there, I was like, okay, I think this might be a date. Is this a date? And
I
he
didn't
was
know.
he
I
was
didn't know what to call it. I was just like,
and he wasn't acting too different. He was just excited. That's the one thing I noticed. We had a youth meeting that evening. So, and the fact that he was trying to squeeze in a movie. Oh, you want to go watch a movie? I'm like, we can't. We have a meeting at church. And I'm like, oh my goodness, I think he likes me. I think this might be a date.
Nice.
So from that moment
So
on,
subtle.
I was like, oh my goodness, do I like this guy? Because let me tell you, I had a checklist and he did not meet that checklist.
I had a baby.
He
That's
had a child with another person, another
that
woman.
wasn't on her checklist. Man with child. Like,
Wow.
And
God's providence.
I know.
I
Right?
just know, I was like, no, but because he was so in love with God, I was just so attracted to that. I could not ignore that. And
Yeah.
that checklist pretty much went out the window automatically. Like I didn't think about it twice, which I'm still surprised to this day because I was so firm that I'm never going to get involved. I think I even told Aldo once back in the day.
Yeah, because that was so unlike you.
Yeah.
You had like, I'm going to go to school, finish this, do.
Yeah.
It's funny how, like, you know, we have our own plans. What's that verse about? Like, you know, the Lord determines your steps.
Yes.
And it's like you can have your own, I think especially as girls, our own idea of like how our marriage, how dating is going to go. And the guy's like,
It's not going to work.
Continue.
So
Pulls up. You want to go see a movie? I don't have no plans.
So I will admit after that I wasn't sure. I was just predicting, like, does he like me? No, he has a kid. He's trying to fix things with, you know, his baby mama and all that stuff. Fast forward, we're talking and we're hanging out more, but nothing's official and there hasn't been a conversation or nothing. And July, what was it?
Well, I think July was when we had that burger, and then a month later when you came back to visit,
because
I took you out
Vacation
on a
Bible
date.
School was happening that month.
Yeah.
And I was volunteering, and we went to a picnic at the park with our daughter Adelie, and we sat down, and after laying the blankets, and he didn't even wait into the picnic, right there he told me, I want to be with you, just like that. And I'm just like, what do you mean you want to be with me? That sounds really weird.
Yeah, I kind of fumble through the gentle aspect. That's me not beating around the bush. I was like, I want to be with you.
Now, this wasn't the proposal.
No, the proposal was wonderful.
Yeah.
I came out of left field for her.
Go on.
So we dated after that. I want to be with you for how long?
3 days.
2 days.
He asked me
Broke
out.
up with you on Tuesday.
It lasted
Over the
3
phone.
days. He broke
2
up with
days.
me on a text message. I
got cold feet.
And I was really heartbroken, believe it or not.
Yeah,
I did not know this guy. Didn't expect it. And after 3 days of courtship, I was bawling my tears out in Tucson, Arizona. I was like, why am I crying? Did I really like this guy? Like, this is so
Smooth.
weird.
And as a girl, it hurts. You know, you wonder, like, am
Pick her
I
up,
inadequate?
drop her off.
After that, I was like, man, I really fell for it. And I didn't even know. But the fact that I was crying and I was just like, wow, this really sucks. And I was upset with him. Did not talk to him. He tried to be friends. Nope, did not work with me. I ignored him. And then September.
December.
No, 2 weeks later,
Martin's wedding.
No, 2 weeks
Martin's
later,
wedding.
I tried to. 2 weeks later, and you said no. You
Then-
think about it for 2 more weeks, and then let me know.
Oh, yeah,
so
that's
it was a
right.
whole month before I'm allowed to date you
Fasting
again.
and really thinking about soulmates and if this is serious, because I wasn't messing with him anymore. I was like, you know what? You hurt me the first time. The second time, you got to earn it because I am serious. After Martin's wedding, did not talk to him. He reached out to me and I told him, okay, you got to be serious. Let's take 2 weeks. He calls me, I answer, and his response is like, you answering the phone, does that mean I get a second chance? And I'm like, well, did you pray about it? Did you think about this? Are you serious about me and us in the future? He's like, yes. It's like, okay, let's give this another chance. So the month of September, we dated. It was really nice. Month of my birthday. He breaks up with me at the end of the month.
I dated for a month after that.
Wow.
Cold feet.
Yeah. Yep.
Smooth.
Which I think it also shows, like, because sometimes people...
We mess it up. Men, we mess it
Yeah,
up.
you do. But sometimes I think girls think that things that have to be, like, just straight and linear, like, you know, like, I'm thinking of, like, the Enchanted movie. Like, that's how you know, right? Like, but sometimes, like, things are rocky, right? They're, like, they're ups
Like
and
a roller
downs.
coaster.
All I can say is glory to God, because He was in control.
Yeah, well, in
even
that
though
moment-
you were not.
Because I be worried about your soul. Why you still be doubting you got a soul? Like you need to see to believe these things, but you believe things that you've never seen. Like feelings and hopes and dreams, the future emotions and gravity. And sadly, everything you're rejecting makes this whole life a tragedy. And I got something to say, I got something to say, I got something to say to the world. And I got place to make, I got steps to take.